Hi, everybody. This is the War of the Rohirrim episode, a film that Dustin saw. I haven't seen it. Helm was here with us for this discussion, but had a nice big old talk about movies. I know that's not really saying much, but if you understand the way we talk about stuff, it always comes back to the broader discussion. So yes, I'll say that the episode ends with a bit of a cliffhanger, and I'll pop into the outro and explain that to you. So enjoy the review. All right, Dustin.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about War of the Rohirrim?
I can, sure.
Because I figured the three of us probably talked the most about that off of mic. So
sure,
I wanted to.
No,
I just sort of assumed Kellen was interested or could at least speak to it.
Did either of you see it? I
did not see this.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I can talk about it for a minute.
Okay. Well, yeah. So this is the I want to say the new Lord of the Rings film, but like I only say it that way because I forgot about it coming out, and then you, Dustin, said something like a few months ago, like there's a new Lord of the Rings film, and I was like, excuse me, and before
what do you mean?
You walked it back. I was like, well, it's animated and it's not directed by Peter Jackson. So
and it's loosely based on Tolkien's writing.
Yeah, and it's like a far prequel or whatever.
Connor was like,
the more I talk about it, the less excited he got. Yeah.
No, well, I was upset in general. I was like, I don't want any more Lord of the Rings stuff. I know. Yeah. I know. I keep getting.
Too bad.
I keep getting. Who gives a fuck what I want?
Hunt for Gollum.
Not Warner Brothers.
Yep, that's right.
They've never cared.
No.
And I keep hearing mixed feedback on Rings of Power. I keep being told like I will appreciate it as a Tolkien lover, but I've also been told that it will frustrate me as a Tolkien lover.
So my understanding of the Rings of Power, and I've not watched it.
Kellen, you've seen some of it, right?
I couldn't finish the second season.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I know a little bit of what happens just through like reading about it, but like I haven't watched it myself. But my understanding of it is it's actually very loosely based on any of Tolkien's writings, like almost not at all. And so it uses
like looking. Oh, sorry. It's like looking at the Silmarillion and being like, yeah, we can kind of work with that.
I like some of that. I like some of that, you know, whatever. But it's not, it really doesn't do much in terms of adaptation. It's more of like, well, we're just going to do our own thing in this world. And War of the Rohirrim.
All Middle Earth knows the tale of the War of the Ring. But 200 years before that,
Riders of the Mark, brothers of Rohan,
there was an older tale.
Arise!
We come with an offer to strengthen Rohan.
Hera, daughter of Helm, I, Wolf, seek your hand in marriage.
Our fathers speak as if I were not even in the room.
I do not want to marry you.
You do not seek an alliance. You seek a throne. You will live to regret this, old man. He's dead. You will pay for this with your life.
The boy I knew would never wish for war.
The boy you knew is gone.
Fire!
There's so many of them. I pledged to fight for my king.
You know nothing of war.
I'm the fastest rider you have. People need hope, Hera. Something to believe in.
My pride. My joy. You could rule the world. You think I am afraid of you?
You should be.
So originally when it was announced, I thought, okay, this is a really good way to extend the life of Lord of the Rings on film without giving me another live action that you have to like make stylistically the same and try to make it match whatever Peter Jackson did, or make it not match and really frustrate me. And so I was really okay with the idea of an animated Lord of the Rings film. It was announced that it was going to be anime, and I thought, okay, like, I think this is probably a good step, because now we can utilize some of the production design elements from Peter Jackson's films, but they're interpreted through a different lens. So it can look like it, but not exactly, and it's okay. And it's not really going to bother me as much. So I'm like, okay, so I like that, because otherwise the other thing is we're going to make it animated, and it is going to try to be Peter Jackson's thing exactly. And that would have probably fallen flat too. So like taking it and saying like, we're going to try to piggyback on what we like about what Peter Jackson did, but stylistically interpret it through a different lens, and even a different culture's lens, I think makes a lot of sense. And then it was announced. So the War of the Rohirrim is based on a small story from the appendices, Return of the King. And it follows the story of Helm Hammerhand. So Helm Hammerhand is essentially the king of Rohan, and he is known as a really brutal and just all around cool, heroic dude. And so like when it was announced, like, okay, it's Helm Hammerhand, everyone was super excited about it. Then as that first trailer came out, which came out way too late in the game, like that's part of the reason why people didn't know about this and didn't care about it, and didn't really show up to the theater, is because they waited way too long to do any marketing for it. And when they did, they included live action scenes from Peter Jackson's films, which I think further kind of confused people. But all that aside, all the marketing side aside, it was clear from there that the actual protagonist of the film was Helm Hammerhand's daughter, Hera. Now, Hera was unnamed in the appendices. Tolkien mentions that Helm Hammerhand has a daughter, and that's all we really know. He focuses on Helm's two sons, but doesn't really talk about Hera. And so Hera is essentially fabricated for this film. While she does some of the things that are mentioned in the appendices, like most of everything about her and about her journey in this film is fabricated. And so I think that turned off a lot of people. And so a lot of Lord of the Rings purists immediately were like, yeah, I'm done with this, because it's a little bit like what I just said about Rings of Power, right? I kind of like the Silmarillion. I kind of like some of this, and I'm going to just like change it and do my own thing with it. The difference, I think, here is it does stay true to what Tolkien wrote about the appendices. It just tells it through the point of view of a character Tolkien didn't write about. So I think that's the twist to it. And so what I'm about to do is give this a favorable review, and I want to set the stage that I'm trying to be consistent in why I don't want to watch Rings of Power, but why I'm okay with this. Part of this is Peter Jackson's involvement. The other part of this is the idea that it is what Tolkien wrote about. We're just flipping it, and instead of making the protagonist who Tolkien made the protagonist, we're pulling it out and saying we're watching this through his daughter's eyes. So yeah, the story is essentially some folks come from they come to Rohan to meet with Helm Hammerhand and ask for Hera's hand in marriage. And Hera's not interested in marrying this young prince who she grew up with. His name is Wolf. And so his WULF.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. And so she's not interested in marrying Wolf.
Hungry like the wolf.
Hungry like the wolf. And when Helm Hammerhand and Hera reject the offer, Wolf's father challenges Helm to a fight. Like, we'll just take this outside and I'm just going to punch the heck out of you. And so Helm Hammerhand is like, all right, dog, like, let's go. And so they go outside.
They don't call me the Hammerhand for nothing.
I was going to say, don't challenge a man named Helm Hammerhand. That's your first mistake. And so they begin to scrap, and this other guy, Wolf's father, tries to beat Helm Hammerhand, but Helm, with one punch, punches him across the chin, breaks his neck, and kills him. And so now Wolf is frustrated because, one, dude just proposed and got turned down, and then moments later lost his dad.
He's having a rough week.
That's a real bad day, man. Like, I love you. I've always loved you.
I wasn't even supposed to be here today.
Would you marry me? No. Oh God, I hate myself. Don't worry, son. I'll stand up for you, and I'm dead. Oh God. So that's the general story. And so now Wolf is out to destroy all of Rohan. And so there's a whole lot more to it than that. And of course, the film, in Lord of the Rings fashion, ends up with some pretty epic battles. And yeah, I won't go any further than that in the story, but in terms of the cast, Brian Cox plays Helm, Gaia Wise plays Hera. There's a whole bunch of other folks who are of varying degrees notable, but for our purposes, we'll talk about Miranda Otto's return as Éowyn. Éowyn narrates this film and sets it up much like Galadriel did for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, sort of narrates this story and says, like, there's a reason you've not heard Hera's story. We don't tell stories about women in Rohan, and this is one of those stories, right? Like, I know it because I'm Éowyn and I know all kinds of cool things about women because look at me.
I am no man.
I am no man. And so, yeah, the story is really cool. And the reason that I start with what I think about the story is the animation is really lackluster. And I think that this is going to be a sticking point for a lot of people. So there are people who just don't like anime and can't deal with this. Okay, that's fine. I think you're missing out. And then there are people who are really into good, well animated anime. And I think you're gonna be frustrated. I will say, for me, after getting engrossed in the story, after 30 minutes or so, I stopped caring. To some degree, it wasn't bothering me as much. Now, of course, there are always moments that I'm like, almost see what you were going for. But for the most part, I start to just accept that this is the reality of the style of the film and just begin to lose myself in the story. And I do think it's a good story, and the member berries are there. But I think that they're minimal. But I mean, like, part of this is, a big portion of this film takes place at Helm's Deep. And so, I mean, it's Helm's Deep, right? Like, you're there, right? So, I mean, of course, the whole setting is a member berry at that point. And even in Rohan, like, it's stylized to look exactly like Peter Jackson's Rohan. So, like, there's all these moments where you're like, the big member berries that stick out come at the end of the film, and there's enough goodwill there I'm okay with it. I do have one big gripe with continuity, which I actually, like, reached out to a Tolkien dude on Instagram and was like, what do we do about this thing at the end of the story? And he didn't respond. So I have no word of wisdom.
He said, we burn them.
we burn it. I will say
them.
he gave the film a favorable review too. So, like, it's evidently there's either an answer for it that I don't know, or he's in the same boat as me, and there's just enough goodwill to carry it in and just like, okay, it's fine. That's probably a studio note.
I thought you were going to say, I reached out to a Tolkien scholar and he's here right now tonight.
Come on in, Jeff.
And then Dustin just takes off that hat and puts on a different
a big wizard hat. And I have my staff.
Don't you have
a big long pipe?
A big long pipe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Didn't you get one with the, what is it?
Oh, I do. Yes, I have
the door to Moria?
the Tree of Gondor. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's here right now.
It is me. So, I mean, there are things, they feel like studio notes. They don't feel like, it was something that they were trying to do. So the film's directed by Kenji Kamiyama, and he's most notable for his work on some of the Ghost in the Shell things. He's a writer, director. He's worked on a lot of that kind of stuff.
Was he like a director or storyboard supervisor or something?
He did screenplay, and I think that's most. He's directed a bunch too. So I think everything he wrote, he also directed. So Ghost in the Shell, The Last Human. It's some of the like from 2020 forward.
Yeah, he directed the Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, which was not the original film. It was the anime series, one of the anime series.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that makes sense. And then, just a bunch of little things here and there. But yeah, man, he did work on Akira, which is cool. But yeah.
He worked on DuckTales background paintings.
Yo!
1987 DuckTales backgrounds.
Yes.
One of us.
Yeah.
Go for it, Kenji Kamiyama. But yeah, man, like I can see where he's going with it. Here's the thing about the animation. I don't know exactly what they did here that's so off-putting. What it feels like to me, like I'll try to explain what it feels like, and I don't know technically if this is true, but what it feels like is they created backgrounds in like a 3D environment, and that way they can move the camera around, and then they animate traditionally on top of the 3D camera movements on painted backgrounds. And so it feels a little disjointed. And unfortunately, there's a moment right at the beginning of the film where Hera, it's supposed to be this big sweeping shot of Middle Earth, and it kind of like, flies into Rohan, and you see Hera riding a horse, because Rohan, and she's riding a horse, and one of the eagles, like the great eagles, comes by and like swoops by, and so it's this big like shot where the camera spins around her on her horse to reveal the eagle, and there's just a lot of perspective issues with the horse, like specifically riding as the camera tracks across. Mm-hmm. And it's like this big reveal. It's supposed to be this big majestic thing. And I immediately, and of course this is like before any dialogue. And so I'm just like, oh man, is this movie going to suck? Because immediately I'm pulled out. But again, the story is really good. The voice acting is really good. I enjoyed it. There's, we always talk about the contingent of people who want to scream woke at everything. They're like, it's a female protagonist. Lord of the Rings can't do that. And shut up. Yes, it can. Here's the thing. I actually really love Hera, like as a character, and Helm and a lot of these characters. And I see no reason why, like, it doesn't strike me as weird in like that Tolkien wouldn't have liked this. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't, like Tolkien wrote Eowyn after all. Like there's no reason to believe that Tolkien would have been against Hera. So I don't understand where this is coming from. And then just because she's good at what she does, suddenly people want to call her a Mary Sue, but I don't think that that's, and
of all the countries in Middle Earth too, it makes the most sense for Rohan to have capable women like that. Like they're literally called shield maidens.
Oh, I was going to say, so they talk a lot about the shield maidens, which of course Eowyn is a shield maiden, and this clan of shield maidens existed, and their stories were mostly lost to time.
Yeah.
And so like historically, yes, this should be something that happens in Rohan, and by the time Eowyn wants to fight, that's not a thing. Like the men say, no, like you can't do this. But the shield maidens were always a thing.
Well, and Sauron, there's also a layer too in Middle Earth of like with the influence of the ring and with Sauron and everything. Like there's a layer of has-beenism around like every country except the Shire, where it's like, oh, it used to be fucking cool, and now it's like in decline. You know, that's the whole point of the history of Middle Earth, and all the ages.
Yes, correct. Essentially, Middle Earth is dying and becoming less magical.
Yes,
over time, and that's the whole thing. But like, So in terms of the film, so animation not great. Story, I really like it. Voices, great. Love the acting. The performances are actually genuinely really good. I think in terms of like sound design, this deserves to be seen in surround. Like it's really good and dense and just well crafted. The score is great. So this is not Howard Shore, but it does utilize Howard Shore's themes. His leitmotifs that he established already get incorporated into this fairly heavily. I mean, the appropriate amount. But what's cool is, and I heard a breakdown of the composer whose name is
Stephen Gallagher.
There you go. Thank you. So Stephen Gallagher, I heard speaking about his approach to this. And he's like, look, obviously you want to honor what Howard Shore does. Obviously I want to bring my own thing to it. But with Kenji Kamiyama and this being an anime, they really wanted to embrace like an anime and specifically a Japanese style of scoring. So it's a little bit Howard Shore. He specifically calls out the like Japanese percussion elements that drive a lot of these tracks. And so it's a really cool like marriage of what Howard Shore did with something that's new. So I enjoyed the score, and I think, you know, obviously Howard Shore's music plays a big part of that, but you know, just what's new is great too. And yeah, man, like I think the big thing is you're going to have to deal with the animation, and one way or another, you're going to have to figure out how much that bothers you. And so your mileage is going to vary. You're either going to not be able to accept the story because of it, or you're going to have to accept the story in spite of it. And I think that's just the unfortunate reality of this film. I don't know if it's a case of like, because this was never supposed to be direct to video, but it feels more like a direct to video or direct to streaming thing. And if it was going to be theatrical, that needed some more time and money to get where it needed to be. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'd read something that like this film had to come out when it did to help secure the rights to the Lord of the Rings for Warner Brothers. So I think it just wasn't ready. And that sucks, but I don't think it was ever going to be released in a ready state. And like, it's not like they rushed it and they're like, it's out now. It's literally like, this is all it was ever going to be. Again, your mileage will vary. For me, fresh out of the theater, I hurried to Letterboxd and said 4.5 stars. I loved this thing. I've cooled on it. It's 4 stars for me. I do genuinely like it a lot, and it probably is going to fare better on rewatch than a lot of The Hobbit did. But I think that I just wish it was in a better visual state than it is, and maybe, you know, a couple less member berries would have been nice. But I really enjoyed it for the most part, and yeah, I mean, yes, you know, I'm a fan of this, and I'm probably going to be more favorable to it. Like I remember Hooper, I've always been slightly embarrassed by this, but also like whatever. When the Hobbit movies came out, like we were doing like the best of like our top 10 movies of the year. And you and I both put the Hobbit movies really high on the list, like the best movies of those years.
Oh, we did.
And we did. And I've always been a little embarrassed by that looking back, because I've soured on those movies so much. But I feel like fresh out of theater, like they were released in December and we were doing those lists in December. So I feel like what happened was like we were fresh out of the theater going like more Lord of the Rings. And now I'm like, you know, years on going, no, that should have been one movie.
What?
And you really lost The Hobbit.
What year?
In the movie.
What year was the first Hobbit? Was that 2011?
It's like 2011 or 2012. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It was after we graduated.
Wow.
I watched that third one relatively. What was the third one called? Desolation Smaug?
The Battle of the Five
Armies.
Oh, man, I saw both the first movies when they came out, and then I never bothered watching the third. And I was like, I should probably do that. And I watched it, and I don't remember a single thing about it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've seen the first two twice. I don't know that I've ever seen the Battle of the Five Armies apart from theaters.
You just can't make a shorter story than one of the three books in The Lord of the Rings into a 3-movie series. Like,
yeah, it should have been a lot shorter. Yeah, but that said, like this movie here, yeah, it's based on an appendix, which is like a page and a half, and they stretch it out to 2 hours. Yeah, okay, like you're stretching, but at the same time, you know, it feels. I mean, it's a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is good. It's not like, oh, now part 2 is coming up next year. So I don't know, man. I did enjoy this film. I think you're gonna have to figure out for yourself how seriously you can take it. But I'd be curious to hear what y'all think, because I know you both like Lord of the Rings and all of that, and I think to varying degrees. Like, Kellen, you might get more stuck on the animation.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. But
yeah.
If you're talking about someone who's a Lord of the Rings fan, I like the movies plenty, and I read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, but I'm not Connor. Like, I really want Connor to talk at this point.
Yeah.
Or at least for, like, dude's got a Lord of the Rings sleeve. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm vaguely interested in this. I mean, like if it's well done enough to where it's not going to piss me off, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I really don't have much. I mean, like, having not seen it, like, I don't have much to say other than, like, yeah, like I don't agree with backlash against female characters in this world just because they didn't exist in the source material, because it's like that's the whole problem within in itself, you know. And
yeah,
like I said, like bygone eras of greater glory are a staple of Middle Earth. It's like the whole whole thing. So,
but like she did exist, right? She wasn't named, and he didn't say what she did necessarily, but like she existed.
Yeah.
Yes, it's nitpicking, but like, you know, I mean, the alternative is the film is about, like, the protagonist is Helm Hammerhand.
Sure.
The problem with that is the only story you can tell is dude kills a guy and then and then other things happen. But this, like, by focusing on his daughter, like, I think narratively this is a smart move, because you can look at it and go, how does this affect other people? And I think that's a smart thing. I don't know. And it also, like, the way that Tolkien writes about Helm Hammerhand is very much like legendary, like it's mythic, you know? And so this allows Helm to still be mythic.
Yeah.
Like, she's looking at her dad as an outsider going, this dude's epic.
Fuck,
right?
he's
and
cool.
Yeah. And so we can do the same thing. But like, if we get to know him as a character, there, like, that level of mystery and like, you know, mythology gets stripped away, and he's just a character.
Well, and by focusing on her, there's just, you give your protagonist, like, more obstacles just by virtue of being a woman who is being pushed into a marriage arrangement versus a fairly powerful king.
Yes.
You know?
Well, and to that end, his story is not the end of the story. So, like, there's more that goes on past his involvement in this thing. And so, had we just stuck to him as the character, I think there would still be a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah.
What happens next?
I bet you a lot of the love for the appendices and partial stories and stuff that fans, you know, like, what they get from them is the imagination that they apply to them.
Yes.
And then somebody that isn't the person, you know, that conjured all of those things fills in those blanks, and it's like a how dare you situation.
Yeah, totally.
I get it. Like, Dustin, to speak your language, it would be like, what if somebody wrote a movie about Polythene Pam?
Sure. Yeah.
Like,
right.
John Lennon mentioned her in a song. What's her story? It's like, shut up.
She's real good looking, but she looks like a man.
Or I guess not story, but like wrote another song and said, this is what John Lennon was talking about.
Right, exactly.
She's so good looking that she looks like a man.
Yes, exactly.
What does that mean?
I enjoyed what this did. And I don't know. I think there's an element too of I think that's a really good example, right? Everybody's imagination did something different. So whoever decides to cement one in stone is going to be hated. For me, I hadn't read the appendices, so I don't know. I've read The Hobbit. I have not read The Lord of the Rings. I read most of the Fellowship of the Ring and started to feel like it was going to change the way I viewed the films. And so I stopped. And so I have not read The Lord of the Rings. So I didn't know anything about this beyond just basic things. Mm-hmm. And so I enjoyed the ride, and it's set so far, I think it's 200 years prior to Bilbo finding the ring. So, there's not a huge amount of narrative thrust into whatever else is about to happen. So, it just felt like a nice self-contained story, and I enjoyed it for all of those reasons. But I also can totally understand, one, if somebody goes, I can't watch that because that's not what Tolkien wrote. Totally get it. Totally understand it. If somebody goes, I can't watch that because the animation. Totally get it. That's absolutely, I get it.
For those reasons, that's why, I'm not offended by the Rings of Power, lore.
Sure.
It's made me have to what are Ishtar? And that's an embarrassing sentence to come out of someone's mouth for the people in the room. I didn't know that Gandalf was a deity.
Yeah. They're basically.
I didn't know any of that. You get the gist. So point is I wouldn't. I guess that brings me into my point was what made me not want to watch the film is what I could surmise from the animation quality.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm not so into the story, oh my God, I need to know what holes and gaps this is filling in the story.
It's not going to. Yeah.
So while you were talking about it, I looked up the budget for this film was $30 million. For an animation production, these days, that's a good amount of money. But that's always comes with a little asterisk about what we're dealing with, what other talent is in the film, how much of it is allocated to the animation itself. So I also was sort of soured on the idea because I also saw whatever article or whatever that was basically they needed to make this film or their inaction on the property would lose them the rights or something. Mm-hmm. So it was a means to an end, and it doesn't mean that it makes for a poor film, but it does mean that the need for it to be great didn't seem to be there.
It's a cash grab by nature.
Yes. And so when it comes to animation budgets, it's not to say that it is a good sign that, Peter Jackson is involved. There's actors, known actors and stuff like that being involved in it. That does drain from an animation budget. So if this was a $30 million budget, $30 million did not go to animation. Right. I would assume this was probably an hour and 45 minutes long to 2 hours.
2 hours, something.
2 hours.
2 hours, 14 minutes.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's a lot longer than I thought. So
you got to stretch that over that amount of time. Yeah.
Minus the cost of score, editing, all the other things. When it comes to animation production, I'm betting maybe
half that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Went to animation. And so what put me off of it, and I have to say this in a very tactful way, because when I get critical about animation, it's always about how the knobs and stuff get twisted. So when I say that it looked like a TV show anime, I don't say that to insult that. It had a lot of things that look like the productions that the company that I work on, that I work at, does for TV productions. And some of those things are tools and stuff I don't like the look of, but I know why they have to happen. And it's because of budgets. So what you were talking about with the 3D incorporation and stuff like that. So a lot of the time when you have elaborate sets and you're going to spend time in them, our productions do this. Castlevania does it, every single one. you will construct 3D sets of locations that you're going to depict multiple times. There's a certain level of pre-rendering that's done and then paint over is a process. I don't generally like the look of it. I think it tends to look a bit sterile. I know why it has to happen, and the shows that we make and the productions that use it wouldn't exist if that method wasn't enacted. The fly around stuff, that's probably projection mapping of painted textures. I haven't seen the shot you're talking about, but that's another means of doing a very elaborate shot, trying to mimic its way into 2D as best as it can. It's never going to look 2D. There's no, you're not going to hand paint every single frame of a fly around. So essentially what it means to me is that they didn't have the budget for the, aspiration. They didn't have the budget for the quality level that you would expect from that. And it just reads to me as it's one of the biggest franchises in the entire world with such a success in its history as a media franchise that like you can put more than $30 million into that film. And again, it all comes down to what you do with that money and how you make the decisions that you make. So like, I'm not going to put myself on the level of this director, and I'm particularly not going to put myself on the level of Hayao Miyazaki, who I'm going to use as an example in a second. But I think, it's one of my sayings that I say is like, if you can't do it right, you don't do it that way. Like that's in parentheses. So I say that on my productions all the time. It's like, if we can't do it right, we don't do it at all.
Yeah.
And so what I saw in the trailer for this was a lot of quick and dirty ways to do things when otherwise you shouldn't have staged an action that way or something. There was like an olifant or something charges through a barricade, and you can see the particulates, generated particulates that come off of it.
I know exactly the shot you're talking about.
They're all running on ones, like they're running one frame every 24. One frame 24 times for a second. When the surrounding animation, if it's anime, is going to be 2s at max, but mostly 3s and 4s and stuff like that. And it causes such a chasm between the visuals happening on screen at the same time. It's one of my least favorite things. And so there's ways to mitigate that. And some of it is just not approaching shots that way. So, and I don't say Boy and the Heron as a means to, like, I know you didn't like that film, Dustin, as a story.
But the animation's great.
So throwing that all away, Boy and the Heron, maybe he's past his prime at this point. He's an old man. But like that film, I can't fault any. There's 3D production that happens in that film. It's obvious, but it's not offensive to my eyes. I think it's done really well. That film is probably about 2 hours, and it is $55 million. So for $25 million more with adept hands that like that dude's a perfectionist. And if he probably has some phrase along the lines of that, like if he can't do it the exact way that it needs to be done to look perfect, then he'll work his way around it. So I don't know. When I saw it, I said this would look fine. Like if it went ba-dung and a Netflix thing, went off and that was up, and I was like, oh, that's a cool like new Lord of the Rings animated short series, like a 6-episode or 8-episode thing. I'd watch that in a heartbeat because I know the constraints of those types of productions and what they can and can't do with the time, budget, and all that stuff. And what rubs me wrong about it, I'll still probably go watch it now that you've said the story is worthwhile.
Yeah.
What rubs me wrong is that, and I had that conversation with you guys about a big IP and a laughably low number that was going to be involved with it. It's just very irksome and depressing that animation is seen as the cheap. Like they go, we need to get something done on the cheap and whatever, blah, 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 to secure these rights. Obviously animation, because not only do we not respect animation to give it the money that it deserves, we also can do it in anime that totally, like the anime production pipeline involves Chinese animators being paid abysmally low rates, Indian animators, South Korean animators getting paid abysmally low rates on top of Japanese animators already making abysmal rates. It is a oppression all the way down production pipeline.
Yep.
And that sucks to know that it was positioned to be exploitative that way. And that really rubs me the wrong way, because this is a franchise that you could throw $100 million. Okay, not even 100. You could throw 60, $80 million at this and shore it up in a good way. But I think the returns in box office show you that like this isn't a mass market medium,
but
so to say, if you want to
having said that, no, I agree with you. So the film has today earned $19 million. So it's a flop. Now, having said that, I don't think they care, because again, it's all about retaining rights. Mm-hmm. But to that end, if they had spent, instead of 30 million, if they had spent 60, $80 million on this, the film, even if it's anime, and some folks would just be no because it's anime, I think if it looked really solid and was visually breathtaking, I think a lot more people would have come out. But I also think that a lot of this is on the marketing. And so this is where I look at it and go, this is how I know Warner Brothers does not actually care about this product. It was not marketed. Like this felt like so many people. I remember I went to work after I saw this, and somebody asked me what I had done over the break or whatever. I was like, yeah, whatever. And they always ask me the same thing. Did you see any good movies? Okay. And so I say, I saw Lord of the Rings. They're like, what do you mean you saw Lord of the Rings? Like, nobody knows what this is. Nobody has any clue that it exists. And so I think with this story, although I do, story's good, I do think the script needed another pass. With this story and really, really jaw-dropping animation, this could have won Best Animated Feature, like at the Oscars. I think it really could have done really big business, but they didn't believe in it. They wouldn't give it what it was worth. They didn't market it. And interestingly, Warner Brothers been doing this a lot lately, right? Because you think about all the things that they've poured money into and then canceled, right? Batgirl or the Wile E. Coyote thing, whatever. Think about all of that. And aside from that, you also have something like Juror Number 2, which was totally serviceable film, and most likely Clint Eastwood's final film. The guy's like 96.
Yeah.
And that movie came out and no one saw it, and it wasn't marketed at all. And for a studio to say to a long-term collaborator like Clint Eastwood, we're not going to market what everybody figures is probably going to be your final film. That's a big slap in the face. And I
thought
think
that thing was still shooting. I didn't even realize it was released.
Oh yeah,
it's been on my list
Max
to watch. I had somebody tell me it was good over the last weekend, and I'm like, oh crap. Okay, I saw
it is good. Y'all will get a kick out of the fact that it's all shot in Savannah, and you'll be like, oh, I know that place. I know that place.
They go to Sweet Melissa's.
Sweet Melissa's. But there is one part. Totally aside, you can cut this. There's one part where they're all in the courtroom, and they there's like a day player back behind Toni Collette, and she is back there. She doesn't have a line, but like she's prominently featured, and she makes like a face to Toni Collette, and they like acknowledge one another. And I saw this featured extra, and I was like, who is that? They're in something. And so I go to IMDb and I'm like, who are they? What are they in? And so like I'm searching and I'm like, what do I know this person from? And it occurred to me that the person currently works with me. and so like I'm searching IMDb, like, who is this? And so I was like, yeah, there's I forget what you call that when you see somebody out of context and your brain can't process.
Do you mean like
that.
actively in your theater? Or
No,
you just mean
they work for the university, but they work in Savannah, and they're always on Zoom meetings with me. And like, I see them all the time. And when I go to Savannah, I see them and I'm like, I know this person. I talk to them often. And I saw her on the screen and I was like, who is that? What movies has she been in? Like, real life. But yeah, but all that to say, like, I think this movie could have been really, really, really good. And it sucks that it wasn't. but it is good and it is worth seeing. And I think that time will be more kind to this than the Hobbit films.
Yeah.
So that's a low bar, but
I want to undermine my own pessimistic declarative statement that I said just before. I was like, they should have put more money into it. And then I said, oh, well, but it's so niche, nobody's going to watch it, even if it's attached to
sure.
a huge IP. I say that. Boy and the Heron on a $55 million budget returned $294.2 million and is the 5th largest grossing Japanese film of all time. So
yes.
That's an original story. Granted, it's attached to an auteur filmmaker that has decades of clout and stuff, but it's a brand, Lord of the Rings anime could have been a home run.
Well, I would imagine there's a lot of crossover between those two worlds. And so like the Venn diagram of people who enjoy Lord of the Rings and anime, I think probably is more significant than we realize. Yeah.
Yeah. So I should stop poo-pooing the medium that I respect and work in, just because a bunch of piece of shit film executives don't know how to take any risks these days.
Yep.
But yeah, okay. I'll probably watch it as more of a study.
I think you should, and I'm curious to hear both of your thoughts on this. So if just text me when you watch it. Like I think
when is it coming to streaming?
I don't know. I think it's available to rent now, which is also a really bad sign. And but I think it'll probably be on Max within, I'd say probably by February, because I think it's available on Blu-ray in February. And like I'll pick it up on home video. I mean, I've got the Hobbit trilogy too, but like I'll
it's on Amazon for $20 and Apple TV. Apple TV for $20.
Yay. But I don't know. Again, like story wise, I know I've spent all that time saying the story's great. The story's great. It is great. There are certainly things that I think it could do better. But that's why it's a 4-star, whatever. But like, I do think it's an interesting study. And if I taught animation, which I shouldn't, if I did, I would definitely say to the students, like, you should watch this. Like, watch this as a study, figure out where it went wrong visually, because it went wrong.
Like looking at it, my biggest red flag is there's no way to do a Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings without everything being information dense. So looking at these like costumes, like we're on a production right now, it's extremely small potatoes. It's nothing comparable to this, but it's got the highest, we call it line mileage per character. And so every drawing of like frame of animation, like it took me like 3 weeks to animate a 1.5 second shot because it had like I was controlling a fly around or a fly through hand animated with characters that have more detail than I've ever worked with. And I was like, well, this was a lesson I learned. I made these decisions and I have to deal with the repercussions. And I'm looking at stills of it. It looks great in stills. And that's what
stills look great.
That's what I noted. And I'm like, that means great designs, extremely difficult to animate and on a budget that was probably very strained and stretched.
Yeah, you're right. It looks great in stills, but in animation, it's just a little janky. And like,
and if they had dumbed down the design or reduced detail and stuff, people are like, this doesn't look right.
This doesn't look like Lord of the Rings.
If the backgrounds of Rohan didn't have all of the motifs and intricate carving of wood and all that jazz, people would have been pissed. So it's like, that's a very difficult rock and hard place to be between.
It is, but it's also like, I'll be the first to admit, did we need this story? No. And that's the main thing is, we didn't need it. I mean, I'm glad we got it, sure, but like we don't need it. And it doesn't really propel Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit forward. Like there's nothing in this that's like connective tissue or world building that is necessary in any way. So we didn't need it, but I don't know, man. It's just it's a weird catch-22 of like, you just can't win really. But I'm okay with it as is, only because I enjoyed the story and I enjoyed the characters, and that's fine enough.
Yeah.
And yeah,
it's unfortunate that I think probably since like the Animatrix or something, like anime has been seen as the auxiliary additional media to push an IP along until the next big thing.
Do you remember when they did the Batman anime thing set between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight?
Yeah.
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 That sucked. But yeah, so Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim, I think it's good. I think it's worth your time. Again, I gave it 4 stars. You know, it's not great, but I think time will think more highly of it than other parts of the franchise. Or maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be forgotten, and that's probably better than being remembered as a failure too. So
yeah, it's always interesting to me to see how like different factors, like if it had been given the budget it deserved, or if it had been marketed correctly, like all of these things that kind of fall through the cracks when big corporations are trying to make art but also make money. It's just like it's sadly rare that like it all kind of just goes right, and you've got a really artful film that's entertaining, that makes us like everyone's happy. We get a good film. It looks great, stands the test of time, studio makes money. But then of course, when that happens, what do? They want to make more of them, and then they do it until we're sick of them. And and that sucks too.
Speaking of that, I will bring this up. The hunt for Gollum is still happening.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
So they're still doing oh Lord, Kellen.
Kellen.
Man, I'm about to ruin your night.
Okay, like I said, this one ended on a cliffhanger. We stopped the conversation right as Dustin and I made Kellen aware of the Hunt for Gollum movie, the new Lord of the Rings film they want to make. And so it sort of spawned another discussion about how and when to gracefully end a franchise. And even though Kellen repeatedly says during that discussion that he doesn't want to open a can of worms, we talked about it for like an hour. And so it's just its own episode now. So that'll be another time, possibly next. I don't know where I'm going to put it. Anyways, but that's going to be its own little thing. So look forward to that.